Honourable members, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850, be now read a second time. I recognize the member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And may I also join in thanking the Leader of the Opposition and our Chief Whip for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this very important bill, an act to amend the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I just listened to our Honorable Attorney General, but before I get into the substance of my contribution, I think there's something I need to correct. I need to remind the Honorable Attorney General that we brought down serious crimes to the lowest levels in 32 years. And I need to remind him about our slogan, you talk, we work. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this bill essentially focuses, in my view, on 5 areas, which is electronic registration, tagging, spot speed cameras, red light cameras, tint, disability parking permits. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the event that I run out of time, I think I want to deal with the last item first, because it is a very sensitive item. It has to do, as I indicated...
Honourable member, just want to confirm, you have 30 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Just want to confirm that.
Thank you. I wanted to start with the last item I mentioned, which is the focus on this bill, disability parking permits. I have seen, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when I drive around or when I'm looking for a park, sometimes this aspect of disability parking, even though you have the signs on the road marking, is abused by persons. And when you look at persons who are getting into their vehicles, it is very clear when you look at them, how they move physically, that they don't appear to be disabled. And in some cases, when the bona fides who are disabled want to get into that parking spot, there seems to be an unnecessary confrontation. So there's abuse and hostility. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are told in this bill that to get that decal, that disability parking permit, that a medical report needs to be obtained. And while that is all well and good, and that sticker will be issued by the licensing authority, and it must be displayed in the car, I want to make a suggestion for the consideration of the Honorable Attorney General. What prevents someone who wants to use that spot for their own convenience and to inconvenience a bona fide user, a disabled person, by lending that park? By doing so, by sharing that permit and hanging it on your rearview mirror in front of your vehicle so that you are seen that this is a car that is permitted for a disability person. I want to suggest for the Honorable Attorney General that in Canada, what obtains, it is not simply the decal that is hung on your rearview mirror. What obtains is that the person who is using that facility, who is the driver of that vehicle, who is the beneficiary of that disability sticker, has a card, and in that card has your information that verifies and certifies that you are the person who are able to use that, and who in fact have been given the authority to so use. I want to ask the Honorable Attorney General as well, in an effort to avoid this unauthorized transferability, because sometimes you see people use this way, they know for a fact that if they go into this car park, it's going to be very crowded, based in terms of whether it's a mall or whether it's an event, and they take advantage of that. I want to ask him whether he wouldn't consider having a barcode on that decal that will be facing the front of the vehicle. And just like you have the tintometer, Honorable Attorney General, that someone could flash an electronic item and confirm that that sticker is a bona fide sticker. You know, in Trinidad and Tobago, you have plenty smart people who could reproduce these things and abuse the system and lend the system to fraud. And I hope that my colleague from San Fernando West will give some consideration to ensuring that we eliminate that kind of abuse. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I now want to get into another aspect of the bill, which is, he just spoke about it, my colleague from San Fernando West, the Honorable Attorney General, tint on windows and windscreens. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the bill proposes to delete Section 23(1)(d) of the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, which restricts the use of tinted, treated, or darkened glass on windscreens or any other windows of a motor vehicle, so as to obscure the view of the inside of the vehicle from the outside, and introduce Section 100EA of the existing Act to allow the minister to make regulations to effectively regulate the degree and shade of tint on windows and windscreen of a vehicle or trailer. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Minister of Works and Transport said in another place that the Transport Commissioner would commence work on developing a proper system to regularize the percentage of tint on vehicles, and would further explore using measuring tools for the percentages of the tint on vehicles. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the proposal to remove Section 23(1)(d) and introduce Section 100EA will leave a vacuum in the absence of the actual regulations. The government has been in office, this government, for 5 years now, and at the 99th hour now intends to investigate what are acceptable tint levels for vehicles and whether tint meters could be used to determine visibility. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm sure you would have seen, like many of us, where vehicles are sometimes randomly pulled on the side of the road, and you have to ask the driver to pull out your tint. A tint meter, Mr. Deputy Speaker, works by simply shining a beam of light at 550 nanometers from the instrument sensor through the window to the optical sensor. As the beam is intercepted by the window, the meter then measures the amount of light that passes through and gives a reading of the visible light transmission. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I repeat, in terms of the necessity for this bill, we would have loved to see this happen before now. And what happens is that in this last 5 years, the 5th year, and in our last-ditch effort proposes to amend the government, that is, to amend the law to effectively give the minister extra time to do some more research and develop regulations. There are readily available international examples, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of tint levels as measured by visible light transmissions. If I may just give a few examples, Mr. Deputy Speaker. New Brunswick, Canada, uses 70% visible light transmission for windshields and front side windows, but permits any darkness from the back side windows and rear windows. In Florida, in the United States, it uses 28% light visibility transmission to front side windows and 15% for back side windows and rear windows. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in New York, in the United States of America, they use 70% visible light transmission for front side windows and back side windows and any tint visibility for the rear windows. The United Kingdom uses at least 75% visible light transmission for the front windscreen and at least 70% for front side windows for vehicles, first used on the 1st of April, 1985. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the government must answer the following questions. When will the regulations be introduced? In 6 months? In 1 year? In 2 months? The Honorable Attorney General is saying right away. So we will measure that not with the tintometer, but we'll measure that in terms of your parliamentary statements and the delivery of your promise. We ask the question, if there's a time lapse between the date of enactment and proclamation of this bill and the actual development and enforcement of the regulations, how will existing drivers with obscure tints be policed? We ask another question. Will the same $2,000 fixed penalty apply under the new regulations? Mr. Deputy Speaker, the current demerit system, will it impose new penalties for tints, and will that be introduced? What is the status of the measurement tools for tint? Has the Minister of Works and Transport and the Transport Commissioner tested any of these measurement tools as yet? Have they gotten them? Are they in the country? Has a training program been conceptualized for licensing and police officers in making this transition? We are told that officers will be trained. And will they be in this transition? Trained in terms of eyeballing the tint, from moving from eyeballing a tint to using science and technology to measure tint levels. I ask the question, who are the trainers? Who are the certifiers? What will be the training institutions who will provide this training? Will they be accredited? Because if we do not answer these questions now, they can be challenged in the court and will make this bill something to be further challenged and will break down the integrity of the bill. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I say there must be consistency. There must be objectivity rather than subjectivity. And I ask the question of the Honorable Attorney General, when you are utilizing the tintometer, is it that you are going to get on spot a printout, just like the speed spot or the spot speed ticket or the red light ticket? Are you going to be getting a printout saying what is your tint level and therefore have evidence from the tintometer? And I think that will be very useful. And that is an important aspect of the training in terms of the science and technology of this new mechanism. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I now turn to the criminal justice system and criminality. The Honorable Attorney General declared that the bill will serve a twofold function of reducing the backlog of cases in the criminal justice system and also enable law enforcement authorities to better detect criminal activities through vehicular trafficking. Every piece of legislation the Honorable Attorney General has brought to the Parliament, he sometimes tries his utmost best to connect to crime. The sad reality is that after 5 years in government, over 2,300 of our citizens have lost their lives under this administration, in spite of their ubiquitous, if I may use that word, legislative machinations. The Honorable Attorney General, Mr. Deputy Speaker, spoke, in other words, in another place too, and just here recently, about the use of RFID tags, radio frequency identification tags. which will connect the judiciary to the licensing authority, which in turn will connect to the inspectors and the police officers with handheld devices. However, neither the Honorable Attorney General nor the Minister of Works and Transport have provided a shred of evidence on the proposed governance structure for the use of private citizens' data. In the other place, some very important questions were asked, and the government is still to answer. I asked the question, where will this data collected by the licensing authority on vehicle owners with their personal addresses, email contacts, and other private details be stored? On site? In cloud storage? Has cybersecurity been explored? Has off-site data redundancies been considered at the government's data center? Another question I want to ask Mr. Deputy Speaker. What levels of authorizations will be instituted to access this data? Could the Minister of Works and Transport access the private email addresses of citizens through this technology infrastructure? Could the Transport Commissioner access the private data of citizens? What level of police in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service will have access to the private data of citizens? The Commissioner of Police, the Deputy Commissioner of Police, senior superintendents? Will the TTPS, I ask, have real-time access to this data, as happens in other countries? Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is a natural emotive response to any piece of legislation related to curbing criminal activity. However, we have seen this government increasingly encroach on the enshrined constitutional rights of citizens without any accountability and without any safeguards.
Without accountability and regard encroaching on citizens' rights? Mr. Deputy Speaker, I most strenuously object to that in terms of the disparaging 4 and 6.
Appellate member, I'd like you to retract that statement, reword accordingly, please.
Okay, I retract it, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And with your permission, I continue. On the issue of criminality, RFID tagging in and of itself cannot effectively lead to the detection of crime. We have seen the research. We have seen what has happened in other countries. And it must be carefully integrated, which we hope it is being done here, which has been said so far this afternoon, to the national security apparatus. The Honorable Attorney General is always keen to provide statistics, and he did so this evening. He told us that there were 146,000 cases in the magistrates' court for 43 magistrates to handle. And that over a period, in terms of handling these cases, that they're now down to 8,500 cases to be dealt with by the same 43 magistrates. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to go back and mention with respect to the RFID that the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the U.S. Department of Commerce, published a document in 2014 entitled RFID Technology in Forensic Evidence Management, an Assessment of Barriers, Benefits, and Costs. The report says, and I'm quoting, despite the potential benefits of RFID adoption in forensic evidence management, many barriers exist that prevent law enforcement agencies from fully embracing and investing in technology. These include the magnitude of startup costs, the reliability of the technology. We have seen the situation. We have been told there are cameras in many places. And when you ask how many cameras are effectively functioning, you get a very different number. The standardization of the processes. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the report further says, and again I quote, establishing a chain of custody for an item of evidence throughout the process of investigation, transportation, storage, and legal proceedings is a huge challenge for law enforcement. While, Mr. Deputy Speaker, RFID can contribute to improving efficiency in each of these areas, it is difficult, it has been found, to quantify the savings or return on investment, the ROI, due to the varying agencies and handlers involved in managing the evidence. The Honorable Attorney General must tell the country what baseline data is he using. Or do you only use statistics conveniently? Tell the nation whether the government has produced any predictive models on criminal detection rates from RFID tagging. There must be prospective models that we can use to project the system, to ascertain the veracity of the system, to look at the efficacy of the system, and to look at the impact of this on crime and criminality. Added to that, what safeguards will the government take to prevent cloning, spoofing, and even maintenance of the RFID tags? Citizens are now required, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to incur and expense an additional tax of $350 every 5 years, presumably to cover the cost of the RFID tags. I ask the question, does the RFID tags have a lifespan of 5 years? Or if the RFID fails before that, what is the process and protocol for replacement? The government has come today to the Parliament to put a check in the box of tabling legislation, but history has proven that it has consistently failed at implementation. Year in, year out, we look at the delivery, and I just want to give a few examples. In the 2020 budget statement, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the PNM promised to modernize the licensing divisions in Port of Spain, Arima, St. James, and San Fernando, with full 8-hour digitized services to the public. By when? By December 2019. Has that been delivered, I ask? The PNM has promised to start the secure motor vehicle number plate system by March 2020 to improve vehicle registration and remove illegal license plates. I ask the question, has this been accomplished? The PNM has promised to proclaim the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act 2017 by December 2019. I ask that question again. Have you delivered on that? That is the track record that we sometimes often have to make reference to of incompetence, failure, non-performance, and of course, unfulfilled promises. And please do not blame COVID-19. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I now want to turn to communication with vehicle owners. Section 4E of the bill states, and I quote, registration plates issued under this section and Part 2B shall remain the property of the licensing authority and shall be surrendered to the licensing authority where the licensing authority A has caused to be published in the Gazette and at least 2 newspapers in daily circulation in Trinidad and Tobago, a notice requiring an owner of a vehicle to return his registration plates to the licensing authority. End of quotation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the entire system is being digitized, but the government is resorting once again, maybe in compliance with the digitized system, to the archaic means of communicating with motor vehicle owners via newspaper publications. Granted that some of them may not have the technology, but then we are saying that this is a combination, but I think that we should move to a higher system, particularly in the context of what we have experienced recently with COVID-19. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the government is proposing to send traffic tickets via TT Post, but then resorts to mass and indirect communication in cases where vehicle owners have to return their registration plates to the licensing authority. This sounds obviously counterintuitive. If the government feels strongly about newspaper publications, why not also send notification to the vehicle owner directly to their last registered address, in addition to email or electronic communication, Section 79AB1 and 2, both allowed for both scenarios. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would not want to repeat those sections because they are there, but section 17, subsection 79AB says, it states, in case of a citation notice to be served on an owner whose usual or last known place of residence cannot, with reasonable diligence, be ascertained, service may be effected by means of publication in at least one newspaper in daily circulation in Trinidad and Tobago or electronic transmission through the email. It is very possible, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that a vehicle owner could be out of the country and miss the newspaper publication entirely, and therefore direct post together with email communication will mitigate any communication gaps in relation to Section 4E. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the RFIDs can also be used as a last resort option to track down the owner via the authorized authorities if there is no response from the vehicle owner within the specified time frame. Section 20E, subsection 5 is also subject to the archaic thinking of newspaper publication alone. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the accuracy of vehicle registration files at the licensing authority cannot be relied on from experience. We hope that that will be something of the past. And if the government intends to attach RFID tags to every vehicle, there must be a data verification process on the 1.1 million vehicles which the Honorable Attorney General mentioned today. From our information, while we may have 1.1 million vehicles on the records, we are advised that there are about 750,000 vehicles in active use in our roads. The government is committed, and again, as I mentioned in this, the government committed in its 2020 budget statement to begin the process of changing out existing license number plates in March 2020. But I want to make a comment. I want to just go back to the number of vehicles that the Honorable Attorney General told us that we have in our roads, well, registered, 1.1 million. And I think one of the things that we have to look at, Honorable Attorney General, through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is always an alarm, an unfortunate position, where when you drive on our roads, you have to wait until the other vehicle passes. Why? Because you have roadside garages. You have derelict vehicles. And I'm hoping that with this new system, that we'll be able to once and for all clear the roadways. We are talking about traffic safety, saving the lives of our citizens. The Honorable Attorney General told us today that it's about human joy, living with ease, comfort. And therefore, there's much discomfort in many of our roadways. You drive anywhere almost, and particularly in some areas which is close to a garage, and you will see what you have to face. Sometimes these vehicles are not lighted. They have nothing that will alert you that there's a vehicle that is parked there. And therefore, I want to just return to saying that I hope that that will be something that we'll be able to deal with. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're already in June 2020. And as I indicated before, that the law with respect to changing out number plates, which was due in March 2020, has not been done.
Member, you have 2 more minutes.
Thank you very much. The project is already off to a late start. And an estimated 30,555 vehicles to be tagged in 1 month. Let me repeat that. There's an estimated 30,555 vehicles to be tagged in 1 month, or 1,018 vehicles per day, based on the data that we have had here in terms of the registration of the amount of motor vehicles. I ask the question, how will the government realistically achieve this in 3 years? What will the staffing look like to handle this kind of workload? We see the kind of congestion when people have to take your vehicles to get it inspected and to get a sticker at the so many inspection stations. The government is already behind schedule and has under-budgeted on time to complete this exercise. This entire exercise, in our view, will take 5 years under a P&M administration. but much less than that under a UNC-led government. Mr. Deputy Speaker, added to that, there will be obvious logistical complications with simply publishing an owner's name requesting that the vehicle be brought into the licensing authority. And we ask the question, what is going to happen in the case of Tobago? How many licensing offices you have for the entire island? How many do you have operating in Trinidad and Tobago? Many people in Tobago, for instance, may have to journey to Trinidad to address their RFID tagging, but the PNM's incompetence on the sea bridge may compromise Tobagonians. Added to that, the licensing authority will have to work through a range of issues such as stolen vehicles, incorrectly registered vehicles, engine changes, chassis changes, ownership never transferred. All of these issues, Mr. Deputy Speaker, will delay the verification process before the RFID tagging could be implemented in a seamless manner. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member.